Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that a tiny island nation, smaller than many modern states, controlled vast territories across nearly every continent on Earth. Its ships crossed every ocean. Its merchants traded in every major port. Its soldiers fought in deserts, jungles, mountains, and frozen frontiers thousands of miles from home. At its peak, nearly 1 out of every 4 people on Earth lived under its rule. This was the British Empire, the largest empire in human history. An empire so vast that people said the sun never set on it. But how did a small kingdom on the edge of Europe build a global empire that stretched across the world? And how did that same empire eventually lose almost everything it had gained? This is the rise and fall of the British Empire. Our story begins in the late 16th century. At the time, England was not the dominant power people imagine today. Spain controlled enormous territories across the Americas. Portugal commanded lucrative trade routes to Asia and Africa. The Ottoman Empire dominated key regions connecting Europe and Asia. England was ambitious, but it was far from the world's greatest power. Still, English merchants and explorers dreamed of something bigger. They wanted wealth, they wanted trade, and they wanted colonies. In 1588, a major turning point arrived. The mighty Spanish Armada sailed toward England. Spain intended to crush its rival and secure its dominance. But storms, strategic mistakes, and determined English resistance led to a stunning Spanish defeat. The victory gave England confidence. More importantly, it opened the door to a future at sea. Over the next decades, English ships ventured farther and farther from home. Across the Atlantic Ocean, English settlers established colonies in North America. Small settlements slowly grew into thriving communities. At first, these colonies seemed insignificant, but they would become the foundation of a growing empire. Meanwhile, England's merchants searched for opportunities elsewhere. In 1600, the East India Company was created. At first, it was simply a trading company. Its goal was to buy spices, textiles, and valuable goods from Asia, but the company would eventually become far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. As the 17th century progressed, England expanded its influence across the Caribbean. Sugar plantations generated enormous profits. Trade routes connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Money flowed into English ports, ships filled the oceans, and the empire continued to grow. Then came the 18th century. This was the era when Britain truly began transforming into a global power. A series of wars against France reshaped the balance of power around the world. Britain and France competed for colonies, trade routes, and influence across multiple continents. The struggle reached its climax during the 7 Years' War. The conflict stretched across Europe, North America, Africa, and Asia. When the war ended, Britain emerged victorious. The results were extraordinary. France lost major territories. Britain gained control over vast regions. Its influence expanded dramatically. For many observers, it was clear that Britain had become one of the world's dominant powers. Yet the empire soon faced a major challenge. Across the Atlantic, Britain's American colonies were growing restless. Many colonists believed they were being taxed unfairly. They wanted greater representation and greater control over their own affairs. Tensions increased, protests spread. Eventually, war erupted. The American Revolution shocked the British Empire. After years of fighting, Britain lost 13 colonies that would become the United States. For many nations, such a defeat might have marked the beginning of decline. For Britain, it became a lesson. Instead of retreating, the empire looked elsewhere. Its attention shifted increasingly toward Asia, Africa, and the Pacific, and nowhere would become more important than India. The East India Company expanded its influence through diplomacy, trade, and military force. Over time, it gained control over vast territories. Local rulers were defeated or brought under British influence. Entire regions came under company rule. By the early 19th century, Britain possessed enormous power in India. The wealth flowing from the subcontinent strengthened the empire further. At the same time, another dramatic struggle was unfolding. A military genius named Napoleon Bonaparte threatened to dominate Europe. Britain became one of his most determined opponents. For years, wars raged across the continent. Then, in 1815, Napoleon was finally defeated. Britain emerged from the conflict stronger than ever. Its navy ruled the seas. Its economy expanded rapidly. Its factories produced goods on an unprecedented scale. The Industrial Revolution transformed Britain. Steam engines powered industry. Railways connected cities. New technologies increased productivity. As British industry grew, so did the need for resources and markets. The empire expanded to meet those demands. Throughout the 19th century, British influence spread across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Australia developed into an important colony. Canada grew steadily. Strategic territories connected global trade routes. British ships carried goods between continents. Telegraph lines linked distant parts of the empire. The world seemed increasingly interconnected, and Britain sat at the center of it all. Then came one of the most significant events in imperial history. In 1857, a major uprising erupted in India. The rebellion shocked British authorities. Although the revolt was eventually suppressed, it revealed deep tensions within company rule. As a result, the British government took direct control. The British Raj was born. India became the jewel in the crown of the empire. Its population, resources, and strategic importance made it central to Britain's global position. By the late 19th century, the empire reached astonishing proportions. Red patches representing British territory appeared across maps of the world. North America, the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, countless islands scattered across the oceans. The empire stretched so far across the globe that daylight was always shining somewhere within its borders. The phrase became famous. The sun never sets on the British Empire. By the early 20th century, Britain stood at the height of its power. It controlled approximately a quarter of the Earth's land surface. Hundreds of millions of people lived under British rule. Its navy protected global trade routes. Its financial institutions influenced international commerce. Its language spread across continents. Its culture reached every corner of the world. But beneath the surface, challenges were growing. Maintaining such a vast empire was expensive. Nationalist movements were emerging. Many people wanted independence. And then came a catastrophe that changed everything. In 1914, World War I erupted. The British Empire entered the conflict alongside its allies. Troops arrived from India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and other parts of the empire. Together, they fought in some of the war's deadliest battles. The war ended in victory. But victory came at a terrible cost. Millions were dead. Economies were strained. Societies were transformed. Britain remained powerful, but cracks were beginning to appear. Then, only 2 decades later, an even larger disaster struck. World War II. The conflict pushed Britain to its limits. The country fought for survival against Nazi Germany. Cities endured devastating bombing campaigns. Resources were stretched to the breaking point. Although Britain ultimately emerged on the winning side, the war left the nation exhausted, financially weakened, militarily overstretched, and increasingly unable to maintain its enormous empire. At the same time, independence movements gained momentum. People across the empire demanded self-government. Nowhere was this more significant than India. After decades of political activism, protests, and negotiations, independence finally arrived in 1947. The loss of India was a historic turning point. The jewel in the crown was gone, and other colonies soon followed. Across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean, independence movements accelerated. One by one, territories gained freedom. New nations appeared on the world map. The empire that had taken centuries to build was disappearing within decades. The process was not always peaceful. Some regions experienced conflict. Others faced political uncertainty. But the overall trend was unmistakable. The age of empire was ending. By the second half of the 20th century, Britain had largely transformed from an imperial power into a modern nation-state. Many former colonies joined a new association known as the Commonwealth. The political empire faded, but its legacy remained. English became one of the world's most widely spoken languages. Legal systems influenced by British institutions continued operating across multiple countries. Railways, administrative structures, educational systems, and cultural traditions endured long after colonial rule ended. Even today, the impact of the British Empire can be seen across the globe. Its history remains controversial. Some remember advances in trade, infrastructure, and global connections. Others focus on exploitation, inequality, and the suffering experienced under colonial rule. Both perspectives form part of a complicated legacy that historians continue to debate. Yet regardless of how one views the empire, its scale is impossible to ignore. A small island nation once built the largest empire humanity had ever seen. It reshaped continents, influenced cultures, connected distant regions of the world, and changed the course of history itself. For centuries, British power seemed unstoppable. Its ships ruled the oceans. Its flag flew across the globe. Its influence reached nearly every corner of Earth. But like every empire before it and every empire after it, the British Empire eventually discovered a truth that history repeats again and again. No empire lasts forever, and that is the story of the rise and fall of the British Empire